Good morning, and welcome to the First Existentialist Congregation of Atlanta. We are a philosophically based spiritual community founded on existential philosophy and feminist principles and dedicated to human liberation and the protection of the natural world. My name is Patton White, and I will be facilitating this morning's celebration of life. I'd like to begin with sharing our land acknowledgement. The First Existentialist Congregation of Atlanta acknowledges that its sanctuary and the homes of most of its members stand on land taken from indigenous Muskogee or Creek people. In the 19th century, the United States of America forcibly seized Muskogee and Aniunwea or Cherokee lands for the plantation economy of Georgia and other profitable ventures that continue to benefit many Caucasian Georgians today through generational wealth. We're going to go right on to our song for today. This is a familiar tune to many. It is Song of the Soul, and we are being led by Mick Kinney on the piano, Gene Heinrich on the melodica and singing, and Robert Stewart singing, and myself as well as backup. So please rise in body or spirit as you are willing and able, and join in singing Song of the Soul. Thank you so much, Mick, Jean, Robert, and me for that lovely rendition. This morning we are welcoming back Franklin Abbott. Franklin Abbott is a longtime friend of First E and has been a speaker for many services. He is a poet and psychotherapist. He co-founded the Atlanta Queer Literary Festival and co-hosted a radio show for many years on WRFG with the late Lanier Clance, founding minister of First E. He lives with 2 cats on the outskirts of Decatur. Please join me in welcoming Franklin Abbott.
Abbott, and I'm here at my house in Midway Woods with my friend Robert Steward, who is taking the film of this for the service for the First Existentialist congregation this coming Sunday. My topic is coming out of COVID, and I wanted to read some of the things that I wrote sort of from the early part of the COVID epidemic through my vaccinations, through my reentry into the world. And I think that many of the things that I talk about will resonate with people because this is a shared experience that we have gone through. I put myself on a point system like Weight Watchers, only these points are similar to being in a war zone and going out for food or medicine. I can go for groceries once a week if I go at the right time. I check the parking lot of the grocery store, and if it is full, I go home. Today I mail packages and tried to fax documents. The packages went out, the fax failed. Not happy about that. 0 points for Zoom. Like vegetables, I can have all the Zoom I want. Like celery, and though I like celery and I purchase it, when I spend points for groceries, the peanut M&Ms I purchased at FedEx, where I shipped my packages and was continued to be confounded in my faxing, were only slightly consoling. I spent 3 hours on a Zoom conference this evening, and although it is better than nothing, I could not smell or taste anyone. I could feel no compression of arms around my body. I could speak and listen and wish everyone well, and I did. It was celery. And I wanted sweet potatoes with lots of butter. Sweet potatoes that smell like cinnamon. Sweet potatoes that peeled away from their skin, were roasted to caramel and sat warm in my belly. Tomorrow I will bake sweet potatoes, sprinkle with cinnamon, and dressed with butter. I will peel the flesh from the skin and dive in. No points to count, no love to doubt. I was very fortunate because of my age and because of my work to be one of the first persons in Atlanta to receive a vaccine. So it was in January. I did not think while I was waiting, I did not think when I drove earlier in the day, I only wanted to see where I was going. I was nervous about being there on time like I am nervous about being at the airport. I don't want to miss my flight. 3:40 was my assigned time, and I was in line by 3:15. The line was not long but moved slowly. First, a young man with dreads asked for my driver's license and said he would bring it back. He did and gave me a form and offered a pen, but I brought a pen of my own. It was all standard information with a list of things I checked. No. I had not been recently vaccinated. did not have disabilities. I handed him the form. He brought it back with my driver's license, told me to put it on my dashboard. Another young man came and took the temperature of my hand, 97.1. It was cold today. My car was allowed to advance. After what seemed 10 minutes, 20 minutes later, a nurse came to my car. She collected my paperwork. I could see in the car before me. I could see a nurse would come with a syringe. I could see the nurses preparing the syringes. And when the nurse came with my syringe, I lied and told her I wanted to watch. But I turned my head and felt nothing. My nurse had an accent, and I asked where she was from. She said the French West Indies, and I guessed Martinique. I could see her smile under her mask. I said I heard her island was beautiful, and she agreed it was. I promised to wait 15 minutes in case the Moderna vaccine created allergic shock. My eyes did grow heavy, and my lips were tingling as I drove home, but nothing more than a body ache, nothing more. I can tease my friends that I haven't grown extra toes, that my eyes change color depending on where I am sitting. This does feel different from a flu shot, like my DNA has been altered, but maybe for the better. Maybe I'm a stronger lizard. Maybe it is just that my fear has diminished. Maybe I am remembering what it was like to have a body in safety. I never knew this feeling in all the years of HIV. Though there was treatment and I avoided infection, I never had an ounce of assurance that I and everyone I loved, any or all of us, would be okay. Today is a different day. One of the things that I think that happened with a lot of us, particularly if you live alone, and I have to qualify that, I live alone with cats, which is not living alone, but I spent many days during the lockdown completely by myself. Some days I almost disappear. I don't go out. I don't leave the small perimeter of my home and garden. I see no one but the cats, who, if they could, would disappear with me. I may see clients virtually, speak to friends by phone, answer emails or messages, but I dine alone. I go as far as my mailbox, but the mail is of no concern. No packages are delivered, no branches have fallen in my smaller world. The moss is one more shade of green. The birds have eaten half the seed I've left them. I picked another lavender camellia for the vase beside the portal that is my laptop computer. And here I write about cats and my simple lunch, and here I wait for a signal that it is safe, all clear, but until I hear, I am here. And I got, 3 weeks after my first shot, no, I think it was a month. I think with the Moderna, it's a month. I got my second shot. And it was a different scene, a different place. I had done my homework and found the site yesterday. Not without effort, the directions were confusing, and I was confused again today, but I knew I was. I made the correction quickly and arrived half an hour before my scheduled time. It was much more impersonal than the parking lot of the Greater Piney Woods Baptist Church. Yellow tape and orange markers, this time men in Army uniforms, were directing traffic. I filled out the same form. My temperature was 96.7, proof to my conspiracy theory my temperature was going down and was making a lizard out of me. A blonde woman in an SUV broke in line in front of me. I hoped she was a surgeon getting back to the line of duty, but feared she was a politician's wife. Uncharitable thoughts entered my mind, and I pushed them aside. As I inched forward, remembering a slogan on a sign in front of a church, kindness has an echo. Efficiency made any personal connection impossible. The nurse wanted my paperwork and came back with a syringe. This injection hurt where the one before had been painless. I parked in the designated parking area for 15 minutes. Same as before, I drove out symptom-free back to the poorly marked frontage road and turned right onto the Buford Highway. I had promised myself I could take back roads home. The interstate was more gentle than usual, but is often full of push and shove trucks and daredevil drivers. The Buford Highway is a cultural phenomenon, with restaurants and storefronts representing myriad nationalities. I talked myself into stopping at an international grocery store, one I often visited after dental appointments. I overcame a chorus of voices in my head, almost a year old, that sang, why, no, no. My mother told me long ago, you cannot transit life being afraid of stepping on a snake. Even though I have stepped on a snake once or twice, I did not die from the bite. Walking in, there was a huge display of pomelos for 99 cents. I love pomelos and put one in my basket. I cruised the vegetables and herbs, getting a deal on kohlrabi and finding some nice mint and oyster mushrooms. I found roasted tofu and rice noodles. In the kitchen section, I found a device to shred green onions for under $3. Everything except the shredder is in the fridge. My next big culinary experiment will involve these ingredients. I did take a nap that I didn't want to wake up from. My lizard tail, a figment of my imagination, is now long enough to wrap around the leg of another mammal. My arm seems more sore than from my first stick, but not painfully so. It took a few hours to run the gauntlet, worried at every turn if I was turning right. I am glad I stopped into the international grocery store, bought radishes and odd soft drinks, and came home and took a nap and woke myself up for a Zoom with clients. I am rambling now, which is the state of my brain. Once the hunter is killed, the fisherman caught, there's only the recounting and taste of victory. Only for me, it is tofu and kohlrabi. Tomorrow or the next day, I will prepare a feast of mushrooms, vegetables, noodles, soy sauce, and an arm that doesn't hurt, and a body that won't surrender. Many of us are dealing with losses. 600,000 plus Americans died during the COVID epidemic. More people are still dying. More people have been sick. And there's a sea of grief in our country and around the world, because there's so many people who have survived and have lost many beloved and dear family ones and friends. Not all of the deaths were directly related to COVID. There were a lot of collateral casualties. People who could not get appropriate medical help. People who could not get the kind of support that you need when you're sick. And I lost a number of people, not directly to COVID, but as a consequence of our healthcare system being impaired, and our ability to be with people who were ill and in need of support was greatly reduced. I wanted to read a poem about a friend of mine who died in December. Her name was Pat Wells. Pat was a friend and a colleague, somebody who also did therapy, someone who was also a writer, was in a writer's group with her for years. And she was only 62. Pat. Pat was not Patricia, as she had been named. She was her father's daughter and trained to be a dancer. against her mother's will. She was a blithe spirit. She knew how to move, wore elaborate makeup and jewelry. There was never a brighter color than Pat. She dismissed a PhD. She was more than that. Phenomenology informed her being. She gave counsel from the heart. So many were helped and adored her. She kept her mystery close. That was her art. That was Pat at her best. She was smart. She was radiant. She was how the heart shines bright in the dark of the night. Pat was a star. One of the things that most of us dealt with, in addition to loss, in addition to fear, was loneliness. And I think that most of us were restricted in terms of the number of people that we could see. Perhaps we were in a pod, perhaps we were only with one other person, and I was by myself and with cats who are kind of rattling the door over there now. And there were a few people I could, sort of see at a distance, whether we visited in each other's backyards. Occasionally someone who was as safe as I was would come over to dinner. And this is about that experience. It's called My Heart is Satisfied. I don't cook dinner very often. I cook, but cooking for one is a different strategy. If I cook for two, I set the table, make a salad, make sure there's protein, carbohydrate, and colorful vegetables. It takes time to eat and talk to. If it is just me, I pace myself so the food cools, so I swallow gently, and the food goes down smooth. It is more than me, then if it is more than me, then I talk between bites and listen a lot between choosing rice or fish or asparagus next. If I am on my own, then the cats come and go. If I have a guest, they perform. There are more dishes to watch, but I can do that with dispatch. The waste goes in the trash. The kitchen smells like soap, leftovers in plastic tubs. The fridge is full. My lunch and dinner tomorrow and the next day. Either way, I eat well. I am lucky to have ample supplies. But when I dine with a friend, my heart is satisfied. So, after enough folks in my life got vaccinated, I went for my first visit with vaccinated friends, old friends who live in Athens, and this is the story of that visit. I forgot to shut the back door. My cat center sent me a picture along with photos of my two adorables. She takes such good care of them, and she shut the door and locked it. It takes me a couple of hours to leave, if even overnight. I have to make sure everything is all right. I leave a detailed note with payment and feel secure that things are buttoned up tight. Good to see my friends and eat their food for dinner. None of us know what to do with the mask we've worn like condoms. So do we not trust ourselves, the vaccine, or God, whatever God is, or do we just not trust? I go to bed in the dark of a room I've slept in 100 times. I'm trembling. I've let my guard down. Next morning we drink coffee and chat just as we always did. Mask still dangle from an ear, pulled up and down like underwear. Roger and I drive half an hour south to a little town, Madison, to take our friend, the widow of our friend Pat, to lunch. It is the first time we have met since her death. After honest hugs, there's not much to say. Our friend guides us to a popular local pizza place. We have to wait outside for a table When we go inside, my first time inside a restaurant, only staff are masked. This is the first pizza brought to my table in a year, and it isn't a miracle. Tasty, no complaints, but I don't weep for joy. As we talk as if it were normal for us to be here talking, as if we hadn't been in hiding, as if our beloved friend had not left us. Roger and I got back to his home and headed for naps like we had just come out of surgery. Only the driving rain on the roof could wake us. The rain absolved us both of sins, and the copious pollen washed our cars clean. And as the blue came back to the sky, we drove out to dinner. Tacos and margaritas in an open Tex-Mex with two other friends. First hugs in more than a year. We chatted about everyday things as if the war was over, as if it hadn't happened. Back to Roger's, half a glass of wine and a British suspense show on TV. Awful scenes of murder and autopsy neither of us expected. I read a text from my brother accompanied by a brain scan. He had fallen the night before and spent it in the hospital, a bump on the head and a twisted knee. I could tell he was on painkillers. When he talked, they make you talk and talk and talk like spirals that spiral over each other. He is all right, and I say good night. Then an SOS from a therapy client. He is in distress, and I am already a soldier in the Salvation Army. I tell him, open the window and let the bat of despair fly free. Sleep is not difficult. Despite the stress, I am so tired. Help me, help me. Roger cries out in the night. I am up and opening his door. Are you all right? Such a fright. I must be dreaming, he tells me. I go back to bed, but in my head I have cortisol dreams. I am back at my old office and nothing is familiar. Paint is chipping off the walls. The doors are unhinged. I don't know who I am looking for. And then deformed psychotherapists come out of the walls and tell me their names. Their names are like ischemic writing. I can see the figures, but they make no sense. They seem curious, then hostile. I lie, tell them I am looking for Catherine, and invite them to check my pockets. When I tell this dream to Luis and Juan at breakfast this morning, it still seemed fresh. Roger told them about his cry out in the night, that he had night terrors as a child. They bought our breakfast, the first outside. More hugs delayed by a year of bad dreams, masks, and terrible things. Yesterday's storm had crunched a car with a tree. We walked around and inspected the fractured windshield, and then up on the hill we looked deep into the roots and saw the tree had rotted inside, invisible. We gasped in unison and gave goodbye hugs, even firmer than hello. Finally, a few weeks ago, I got to take a little road trip. I'd not gone anywhere unfamiliar, in more than a year. And travel is something that I love, and it's, something that lots of people love. A lot of people are talking about where they're going to go. And this was just a little road trip, but it had an impact on me. And I call it Te La Ne. With thunderstorms predicted for tomorrow and my aging back out of whack, I conferred with my traveling companion and we agreed to leave early. I backed into a rut that we could not push our way out of. Our good fortune, Tuscumbia's fire chief lived next door to our rental. Heave-ho, and he and Roger pushed my car out of the rut and onto the grassy alleyway, and we escaped. A really glamorous young woman, an intern from the University of North Alabama, was our guide at Fame Studios. We got to come within breathing distance of the piano that Aretha played on Ain't Never Loved a Man, and the Hammond organ played by Greg Allman, and the baby grand played recently by Alicia Keys. We drove across North Alabama to just above Coleman, where my father's parents grew up. I resisted taking Roger to the ultra-kitschy Ave Maria Grotto. We were both physically and emotionally exhausted from visits and visitations. After time with our lifetime friends and their 9 dogs and 2 parrots outside of Hohenwald, Tennessee, we drove down the Natchez Trace Parkway to mile marker 339 and made a left. Tom's wall contains what seems a million stones one man and his son lifted over 30 years to build a sanctuary in honor of his great-great-grandmother, who had walked the Trail of Tears and walked back so she could hear the river singing, the Tennessee, at Muscle Shoals. Tom created a magic circle and 2 promenades. You can't take a cell phone inside the magic circle, explained his son. The fairies don't like it. As I walked to and fro in and out of the sacred space, the first and only living memorial, the son said to a Native American woman, I felt the cool of the stones. I looked into their faces. I felt the trees that overarched, and when my mind relaxed, I saw the faces in the shadow of the dappled light. They were winking at me. They were whispering in a language I knew but didn't know. Our next stop in Florence, Alabama was the Rosenbaum House, designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, a work of genius, negotiated between the architect and the occupants and the landscape it sits upon. First occupied in 1940 as a wedding present from Stanley Rosenbaum's father to Stanley and his new wife Mildred, the couple argued with Wright over having windows with screens, this before air conditioning. Wright compromised. The screens would be brass and shimmer in the sunlight. In many ways, the house feels like a stationary train. Narrow halls, a galley kitchen, every space used, a perfect example of Wright's Usonian philosophy to make elegant, efficient, and affordable homes. The Rosenbaums lived there for almost 50 years, raised 4 sons, and sat tight as the house slowly deteriorated. The house and their belongings were donated to the city, and 2 years later had been restored, and what was once a home became a shrine. It is another world of paneled walls and ceilings, Wright always thinking of the play of light. Once on 100 acres, now on 10, a Japanese garden represents the outer space, and a Wright-designed angel guards the door. We visited another house in nearby Tuscumbia. It was the childhood home of Helen Keller, replete with the well where Annie Sullivan taught her finger spelling, and she learned her first word, one hand under the stream of the well wet and the other spelling water. There was the formal dining room where the famous food fight between her and Annie resulted in her defeat. Helen was an imp and delighted in locking her mother in the food pantry and Annie in the upstairs bedroom. Annie took her up north to schools specialized in training deaf and blind persons to get along better in society. Helen decided she wanted to speak and spent hours feeling Annie's throat as she talked, sticking her fingers in Annie's mouth so she could learn how to move her tongue. The hard work paid off. She attended Radcliffe College, graduated cum laude, and set out on a career to help raise awareness of the challenges and possibilities for blind and disabled people. She also raised her voice on social justice and civil rights. She traveled the world, met eminent figures like Rabindranath Tagore and every U.S. president, from Hoover to Kennedy. In the back of the cottage, beyond the tributes from the International Lions Clubs, is a pine tree planted from a pine seed taken to the moon. 30 feet high, there is nothing obviously special about it. I did bend down and slipped a pine cone that has fallen from its branches into my pocket. I left it in the car last night for no particular reason. Maybe I was just tired. I had spent the previous week looking in on my 93-year-old father and my brother's dog Barkley. It was simple enough to visit Dad, talk with his caregiver, let Barkley out, and rub his belly. I thought a visit with friends and then some sightseeing might create a balance, but I was right for the wrong reason. My family week was leitmotif, visiting the Rosenbaums, Helen Keller, singer-songwriter heaven, and a ceremonial spot honoring Lanier, who walked the trail of tears in reverse to find a singing river, rearrange my molecules. We are all listening as we walk. We are all listening as we talk. We are all looking for the word for water, for the place of balance, where the soul can fly. We are all walking down a sacred avenue, saluting each other as past we do. We cannot help ourselves or help each other. We can build lives of beauty. We can learn to speak in tongues. We can go back when compelled to where we come from, like Lanier. And I have one more that I wrote a few days ago. I use the word jitterbugging. If you're not familiar with jitterbugging, it's a dance that was very popular in the 40s. My dad loves to listen to old music, and I think he, at 93 is jitterbugging in his head. I've been jitterbugging through a minefield ever since I can remember, trying to outdance the landscape one step at a time. The next wrong thing and the next right thing are often arguing so loud I can't hear to think. Come back to your breath, the pump of your lungs, your portals, your pores. Find a soft place on the ground, under the shade of a sheltering tree, and let the sun seep in through leaves, like leaves of tea. You suffuse warmth. You make elixir. Your dance relaxes as your body lets go, and Mother Earth cradles you, she cradles you, sings a Creole song in your ear. I know that we are all living in the midst of a vast science experiment, and I feel so lucky that I was able to get vaccinated, and I'm really teasing. I've not grown a tail or an extra toe, and my eyes are still the same color. And my body is just grateful that it doesn't have to be afraid right now. So I really encourage people, if they are physically able, to get vaccinated as not only a gift to yourself, but as a gift to the rest of us. As we're coming out of COVID, I've compared it to being like I've been in a cocoon, now I'm a caterpillar, and I still don't know what it's going to be like to be a butterfly. But I'm looking around and sort of delighted to see the world around me, delighted to be able to give friends hugs, because there was a year where I couldn't. It's granted me perspective about the things that are really important to me, and chief among those are connection. And to have been sort of in solitary confinement for a year, albeit in the nicest cell that I could possibly find, I still got perspective on how important it is to spend time with my friends, and how important it is to take good care of myself. And I'm hoping that each of us, as we've gone through this very difficult and challenging experience, complete with losses that, I lost a number of friends this year. I've not been to a single memorial. I've had a number of friends sick and have not visited anybody in a hospital. That is changing now. And my hope is that as we are coming out of COVID, we can retain the valuable lessons and perspective that we got as we went through this terrible experience, and live fuller and richer lives and more connected lives now that things are much, much better, at least here in the U.S. We don't really know where this science experiment will go. Right now, I'm really enjoying, being vaccinated and feeling safe. And I hope that that is true for everyone out there that has been able to return to a state of safety. I really appreciate this opportunity. Robert has been a real trooper. He's held his phone the entire time I've done this, and he gets a gold star. Thank you so much, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much, Franklin. As always, your words we deeply appreciate. Please join us on Zoom immediately following this broadcast, where we will be sharing personal joys, sorrows, and concerns, as well as discussing the topics that Franklin introduced today. You can find the link to the Zoom meeting in the comments section of today's broadcast. Next Sunday, we will welcome back Anthony Knight with his talk, The Paradox of Independence, or I, Too, Dream America. Thank you so much for being with us today. Have a wonderful rest of your day today, rest of your weekend, and the coming week ahead. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.